name's Paul Lees, and I'm one of the founders and current CEO of PowerNow. And the story really is about building a company from a startup up to an exit, which happened last year, and it was a reasonable exit for a London firm, we think, of about £33 million. So really this is a sort of story of the journey and how we got started, and the information and the tactics that we used to get where we are today. But back in 2003 there was really four of us, and as it turned out the four of us had all worked together before. So in my previous startup, Mick, who was the technical director, Martin was the finance director, and Andy was an investor. And we got our initial start, our seed money, from both Andy and I selling previous companies. So in both cases, this is our second enterprise that we've been into. And that's, when you get the first seed money to start a company is always a bit of a problem. In our case, we were fairly lucky. That luck actually held. So throughout the time that we've run PowerNow, we've never actually taken external investment. So when we got to the exit, the exit was all the four directors. A little bit about PowerNow. What are we? What do we do? And I'm just wondering if anybody here knows who we are. Yeah, Nick, that's good. It's kind of in this sort of team, in this sort of group of people, I would expect most people to know who we are. We're a conference call company, so what we do, pretty straightforward. You register on our website, we give you a PIN, you dial up a telephone number, type the PIN in, and everybody talks together. That does sound like a pretty simple proposition, right? And really, those are the things that we live by. It's simple, it's reliable, and it's free. Okay? Free in this world never means quite what it says on the tin. But what happens is you pay us through the phone call that you're making. So we're a phone company in our own right, and every minute of telephone call clicks a little register, and it's 5p, which is what we get per minute. Which again doesn't sound like very much. Yesterday, for example, we did 1.5 million minutes of conference calling. So 1.5 million 5p's turns into quite a large number at the end of the month. It's also quite a nice model because our engagement with our customers means that we don't have to take things like credit cards, we don't have to take many details from the customer, just an email address, which is effectively all we need to get going. Which means it's a very friction-free process, and nobody really particularly worries about the cost of a call. So the cost of the call is going to be something in the region of £2, which is probably less than the Starbucks cappuccino that you're drinking during the call. The other thing that's a bit unusual about us in this space is that we focus particularly on small medium enterprises. So we use B2C tactics to attract customers, and that again has led to dividends. So most of the other conference call providers sell to a professional buyer. In our case, we don't. We sell to the individual. We sell to what we call a user chooser. A few fun facts about PowerNow. Again, those of you that have heard of us might think that we're a little company in West London. That's true. But we actually do more conference call minutes through our service than the entire country of Spain and the entire country of Denmark. So on a monthly basis, there's about 50 million minutes of conference calling going through the PowerNow network. The network itself was built by our staff, so every bit we control, from the ingress of the phone calls from BT right the way through to the bridging, that's all our stuff. And the other interesting feature is that we register about 300 new users a day, which is a relatively big number, and a large number of those go on to be regular users. And still today, despite the fact that we spend a couple of £1 million in advertising, most of our new users come from recommendation. So people that have used Powwow, people that have enjoyed the experience, people that we're naturally viral, right? Because by definition, a conference call has got one moderator, one organizer, and 2 or 3 people that participate. So those 2 or 3 participants think, oh, this is quite straightforward, and go on to use. So that's still our biggest source of new users. So this is a little bit about our storyline. When we got going, which was back in 2004, and that was just the 4 of us, up to today, where there's 65 people that are inside PowerNow. And there's various bits of the journey. So any startup begins selling the benefits of their service. So, I say to you that a conference call is good because you don't have to travel. A conference call is good because you can collaborate when you're not close to each other. And that's traditionally how anybody starts. Sometime around 2008 time, 2006, we decided that conference calling is fundamentally a boring subject. Nobody really goes down the pub at night and goes, I was on a really good conference call today. So we decided that selling the benefits was no longer a good way forward, so we would actually start to build a brand. Brand building is quite an interesting process. I imagine if I asked most people here to name any other conference call provider, they probably couldn't. Now, the fact is we're not the biggest by any means, but we probably have the biggest brand recognition in this space. So this brand building made sense. We also took mechanical, the sort of lower line is the mechanical things that we did to make more money. So one of the things that we did is we became a telephone company in our own right. That's about £1 million worth of investment, but it means that we're at the top of the food chain in terms of rebates, which are paid to us, very important for our revenue, and in terms of reliability, it means that everything that we touch is under our own control. So if anything breaks, anything goes wrong, our staff can fix it. And it's true to say that Powwow hasn't been off the air for 5 years, so Powwow now doesn't break down. It's a bit unlike some of the more modern competitors. If you use Skype, you're going to probably have it fail at some point during your call. In general, people think that the conference call itself is the cheapest thing that's going on in that meeting. The members of staff that are actually speaking, your customers, etc. You just don't want a lack of reliability. And later on, sometime around here, we decided we needed, we were a nice, decent size. We'd done all the entrepreneurial stuff. We were turning into a kind of execution company, and we decided it was time to do an exit. So a lot of this stuff informed the exit. So, for example, we started to build a management team, and also we bought one of our competitors. Both of these are actions that aren't necessarily, they don't necessarily make you more money. They don't necessarily give you more profitability. But what they do is prepare you for sale. We put ourselves on the market last year in about sort of May, June time. And then the process ended in, we reached head of agreement in September, and the company was sold last year to a big American trade competitor. I will talk about that exit process later on, because it's kind of interesting how we got to the company that we finally sold to. And then this year, 2014, is my earn-out year. So though I'm kind of wearing the CEO's stripes today, I actually give them up at the end of the year to the person that's taken over after me. Becoming a brand. Conference calling is boring, right? Nothing very interesting about it. If it works, nobody talks about it. If it doesn't work, everybody knows. So what we decided to do is not just talk about the benefits of conference calling. We decided that we would start talking about things that saved you time, money, things that made your working life better. And so we've had a variety of campaigns, and this example is a tube car panel example where we've got something to say, which I think the advertisers here would call it cut through. So if you're in a busy tube car panel, there's lots of advertising going on, you need something that's going to grab an attention and a headline. This actually ran in 2008 in the middle of the financial crisis, and that character there is called Cecil, and Cecil was our sleazy banker. And Cecil fundamentally had more money than sense. So we were trying to draw a line between people that have got more money than sense and our customers, the Powwow customers, who have got more sense than money. So that's the kind of strap lines that are going on there. Cecil was quite successful in terms of a campaign. He got lots of attention. He actually got people defacing him on the tube because he's not a very nice looking character. That was an example of cut-through working. Our advertising in general starts if you like, at the beginning, you've got things like pay-per-click, Google pay-per-click, where if somebody types in the word conference call, you can serve an advert, they click on the advert, they come through to the website. That's our kind of best traffic, if you like. That's somebody that's pre-qualified and they're interested in what's going on. You come to a point where you can't spend any more money with Google. So then you take the next set of cheaper advertising, which is things like SEO, and it's things like digital banners. Digital banners are good because you can measure those, but again, they don't get too far. At some point, you run out of digital means of communication, and you have to go for something which is outdoor. And really, our outdoor campaigns have been all about understanding that there's a company called Powwow Now, and understanding that we're actually there. So hopefully, somebody will type in conference call, see our name on the list of the 10 conference call companies that are available, and because they've seen the out-of-door advertising, they'll recognise the name and click through. It's quite a leap of faith to start doing brand advertising, because suddenly you're no longer advertising for direct response, and you sit there and you see all this money going out and you wonder which is working and which isn't. But after a while, it turns out that your brand recognition and the viral effect of people using the service and recommending it begin to pay dividends. So right now, the campaigns that we run cost around £2 million a year, but all of that campaign is only responsible for something around 40% of our new users. The rest of the users come from recommendation. So we have to keep filling the funnel and seeding the new users, but fundamentally, that's how the brand story took place. The next bit of the story is, okay, if we've decided we're going to do an exit, how are we going to build ourselves into a shape that somebody's going to buy the company? The next bit is building a team. And I'm not sure if this is a particularly popular entrepreneur story, but fundamentally we're not very good managers. So entrepreneurs in general, we think fairly fast, we challenge things, but really we're not very good at looking at the same report every week and trying to eke the next 5% or 1% out of a campaign. So that's where it was necessary to professionalize the company. And we did that by employing managers. The other factor of this is if you want to exit from a company, you don't want to be the person that the company is buying. Yeah? So your purchaser is going to buy into a story. And if you want to exit, you don't want you to be the person that is central to the company. So we very deliberately started. We started with a technical director. After that, we got a managing director, a CEO, and then after that, a marketing director. So we built a whole officer class, which was professional, very well paid, highly incentivized, both in terms of bonuses and in terms of a sale bonus, if you like. So they all understood what the game was, and they all understood that they had a future. It also transpires, this was a 2 or 3 year journey, that sometimes the first person that you hire is not the person that's going to take you all the way. And I think it's a factor. Powwow used to grow 30-ish% a year. So in 2 years, we'd have grown by 60%. We'd have gone from maybe a £6 million company to a 10 or £11 million company. And that actually makes it quite difficult for some of these people to cope. So we did actually burn through a couple of managers before we got the right team to go into the exit. In 2011 time was the time that we, as a team of four, sat down to talk about how we were going to exit and how we were going to, or what we actually wanted. And again, that's a kind of fundamental step that you have to go through. So we have to look each other in the eye and we had to say, right, this is an acceptable exit. So randomly, one person was not particularly motivated by money. They wanted to do interesting work. 2 of us were fairly motivated by money, and another one was fine so long as everybody else was happy. So these were the stories. Andy and I had a number that we wanted to achieve, and we kind of worked backwards from the exit number. So interestingly, I don't know if you saw at the beginning, but the published sale price was 33 million. In fact, there's an earn out on top of that, which gets us to a little bit closer to 40, and 40 was our magic number. So we didn't quite achieve the magic number that we set out to get to, but there's a story along the way. So selling a company, fundamentally, not many entrepreneurs sell companies very often. So you actually need professional advisors to help. And what we did is we did a beauty parade of different advisors that could work with us. Some of them were very big, companies like Ernst & Young, BDO, and some of them were smaller, more boutique companies. In the end, we chose a boutique company, they were actually called Catalyst, as our financial advisors. And their job was to actually groom, bad word, was to move the company into a state where it was a saleable company. So they pretty much looked all over everything that we had in the books, the balance sheet, etc. They and we highlighted some areas where we had problems. We had an underperforming subsidiary which had left a hole in the balance sheet. We decided to close that subsidiary and write off the outstanding amount of money that was on the balance sheet before we went into the sale process. So fundamentally it was to make sure that we were in a position where a purchaser could look at us and find no skeletons in the cupboard, to find a situation where they weren't going to be put off by something we hadn't told them about. And again, pretty kind of key moment, that one. The beauty parade happened just before Christmas. We did all the work with the corporate finance firm to put ourselves in the right state, and then we went out and we ran a 2-track process. The one track was a trade sale process, the other was a private equity process. They are different animals when it comes to buying you. A private equity company is fundamentally not interested in running a company. They're financial engineers, they're not business people. So they want to buy into a team which will take the company forward, and basically they've got a relatively straightforward formula. You know, they put this much money in, they sell it again in 5 years' time and get this much money out. And so long as the formula works, then the private equity company is interested. A trade buyer is a bit different. So in our world, there are some very big conference call companies, and all of them were interested. We're a different animal from them. They sell to the sort of top 1,000 companies. They sell on contracts. They don't understand marketing. So what they wanted from us was a marketing presence, and indeed one of them actually wanted our network. So there was maybe 4 or 5 trade competitors that went into the beginning of the process. And then you negotiate your way through each of them, and by around the sort of late August time, we had the offers on the table. In our case, the private equity offers didn't work. And this goes back to the discussion that we'd had early, which was about an exit and what we wanted from the exit. And the PE guys were willing to pay more money. In fact, they were willing to pay the number that we wanted, but they wanted the principals to stay involved for another 5 years, which wasn't the exit process that we were interested in. So we decided to actually take a smaller headline number from a trade competitor, but that was a cash offer rather than meaning that we were stuck in the company for another 5 years. So that's why it's kind of key that you actually sit down and talk about what's going to happen before the process starts. So got to the point. We flew off to Atlanta, which is where the company that bought us are. We sat in a room. They told us how rubbish we were, and then they offered us less money than we wanted. And we told them how great we were and why they should pay a lot more money. And then basically, the negotiation took place. We had a little huff and walked out. Our financial advisors stayed in the room and they negotiated the deal that we got. So, it's all a kind of stage managed process where, they want to pay the minimum, you want to get the maximum. You all know that somewhere in the middle you're going to actually reach a deal. You wouldn't be sitting in Atlanta at that point if you didn't think the deal was going to take place. So really it's just a negotiation at that point. Now, credit to the company that bought us. The heads of terms that they gave us in beginning of September were the heads of terms that we signed as the contract in December. And in the year that they've owned the company, they have behaved properly and they haven't interfered with the company. So the earn-out is looking like it's going to work properly. I think that was that's credit to them. It's also credit to the financial team that we had. So throughout the entire process, they didn't find anything in due diligence that they didn't expect. There was no deviation from the business plan. We had ourselves locked down into sale mode. And it meant that there was no excuses for them to chip at the price or change the deal. So those were the steps we went through. So this year, 2014, has been my earn-out year. It's been interesting because it's now somebody else's train set. So I've been looking after the trains for them, but without actually owning them anymore. And as I say, they've been very good. They understand that they don't know how to do marketing. They bought us because we do. So they've let us run the marketing campaigns this year. Our growth has continued. It's still a good business for them. It's still the business that's growing fastest in their portfolio. So it's a $600 million company that's bought us, and we're still the sort of jewel in that particular crown. And they're extremely happy with us. We're the most sort of pound for pound the most profitable group of their company. What does it mean for Powwow? So I still actually care. So although it's no longer mine, I actually care about the people that are there and the future of the brand. And the big advantage to having someone with deeper pockets than us is that they can invest in software development that we never could. So around now-ish, in fact, we're launching a product called iMeet, which allows you to do with desktop sharing and video the same things that Powwow has always done with audio. So the mission for Powwow is to become sort of the default collaboration method for businesses in the UK. And the other thing that they're very excited about is the same market dynamics work in France and Germany. They're much smaller markets, but the same shared cost regime exists, the same the same business problems exist in France and Germany. So this year we spent time working our way through changing our proposition so that it'll work in the other countries. So fundamentally, that was the story of Powwow from the very beginning right the way to the end in about 25 minutes. That's all I've got to say about this, but very happy to either take questions or talk to anybody individually afterwards if they're interested. Oh, yes, sorry. There we go. That's who I am, and that's how to talk to me. Oh, hang on. I'll have to step forward. How do we come up with a name? Right. So. All right. So name and idea. So the name. You're the wrong age. You're not. In the older members of the audience, a powwow, when we used to watch cowboy and Indian films, a powwow was what we would have called Red Indians, but I suppose it's now politically correct to call them Native Americans, would have sat down together and talked, and that was called a powwow. So we were looking for something that implied getting together and talking, and powwow was a word that worked, and then adding the now on the end gave it a degree of immediacy. Where did we get the idea from? Well, conference calling is not new, right? So that conference calling had been around for a long time. Our wrinkle on it was to make it free. And making it free removed the friction. So when we started doing this, in order to get a pin from BT Meet Me, you had to ring them up, they would write down some details, then they would send you a pack, and you'd sign a direct debit, and then about a week or so later, you'd be able to make a call. With Powwow, you type in your email address, you get given a pin, and by the time that pin's on the screen, it's been provisioned onto our bridges, and it's available immediately. So it's just a kind of change to an industry that was relatively static until that point. And our way of doing it has, there's a lot of people that have followed us now. So it's not unusual to do what we do today, but it was 10 years ago. Sorry. Yeah. So a traditional conference call company will sell to a professional buyer. So they will go along to Smith & Williamson and say, they'll find their facilities manager and they'll sign a contract and they'll sign up 300 users and put them onto the network and roll it out and train them. We may have 300 users in the one company, but they will all have signed up directly with us. So we attract somebody called a user chooser. So you have a particular requirement today. You'll type conference call into Google, you'll see our advert, you'll click on it, you'll register, and you'll be able to use it immediately. So it's a very different concept from the traditional incumbents. Yeah. So the question was I in the telecoms business before? Tangentially, yes. So I did used to work for BT, but nothing to do with telephones. But I was a project manager and then program director inside BT for big parcel companies and things like that. And in fact, I used to live on conference calls. Inside BT, this is in the 90s, you never saw a bill. So it was all paid with wooden dollars. Yeah. When I left BT and went into my first startup, we actually did organise a conference call using BT Meet Me, and it cost us £40 for a conference call. And I went, bloody hell, that's expensive. We won't do that again. The person could drive to us in the future. So that's how that bit of the story happened. So no, I wasn't I'm by no means a telecoms expert. Just fortunately, I have people like Mick who were telecoms experts who could build the necessary infrastructure to run this. So the question was, why didn't we go into France and Germany earlier? We did have a presence in France and Germany. We have for about the last 5 years. The problem is, how much money do you have to spend to establish a brand? Okay. Now, if you take as an example something like a cost per click in Google, or click-through rate, better than cost per click, right? In the UK, our click-through rates are something like 15%, which is very, very good for a competitive keyword like conference call. In somewhere like France and Germany, it's 5%. Still very good, but that's the difference the brand makes to the effect. So if somebody sees a brand that they've heard of, the propensity to click on the ad is so much greater. So we were faced with, remember we wanted to do an exit, right? We were faced with where do we spend our money? So we chose to spend our money actually on acquiring another company and building ourselves in the UK rather than building a brand in France and Germany, because we knew that was going to be another 5 or 7 years. And indeed, this year, with quite a lot of money in Germany only, we've only managed to double the size of the business in a year. So we've gone from something like 7 to 10 registrations a day to 20 to 25 a day, which, if you can consider 300 in the UK, now Germany's a smaller market, right? So it's about half the size of the UK. So we should be able to achieve 150 registrations a day in Germany, but right now we're at maybe 25. So you see, we've got a long way to go in those. So, and the new parent understands that it's a 3 or 4 year program to get us to a size in those other markets where it'll work. It's also true, by the way, that we have to change the proposition quite a lot in France and Germany. So they don't quite react the same way that British people do to our level of slightly risky humour. Certainly the French don't like that at all. So those are the. That's why we didn't do it then. Thanks very much.